So just listen to this, because I've egged it so much that you might fear I've over-egged it, but I don't think I have. I think this is quite brilliant, and it was written in response to our clip, actually, about the weird dislike of Prince Harry and his wife and where it comes from. And a lot of people are unhappy with the observation that her ethnicity is one of the most obvious reasons to distinguish between her and other female members of the royal family. But so the Twitter account is called Royal Suitor, and as with so much online, I don't know what's real and what's not. But the byline on this is RS Lock. Pay attention. This is really important. It's only a 3-minute read, and I'll share it with you now, because I felt pennies dropping as never before when I read this. So we'll start at the top again. I might do my Jackanory voice for this. All right, I won't. Imagine a society founded on a class structure with the brackets white, close brackets, and the brackets are important, British royal family at the top as determined by birth and by blood, right? Don't have to imagine it, that's what we've got. It's not a matter of opinion, that's a matter of historical fact. A biracial woman enters the top of the pyramid by marriage, negating both the birth and blood requirements society had previously been told were preconditions. Because she lacks those prerequisites, she's considered unworthy. Because she's proud of her own heritage and regards herself as equal to others at the top of the pyramid, she's considered ungrateful. The town criers called out from the lower tiers of the pyramid, "I've never met her, but I look at her and I don't think I'd like you in real life," said one. "We Brits prefer true royalty to fashion royalty," proclaimed another. These are direct quotes from prominent columnists and commentators. Shouts of "she just doesn't speak our language" came whistling on the wind. But at the top of the pyramid, the cries were met with silence. So she's under attack in some fairly horrible ways, and they expected perhaps to get some support and protection from the boss, or even the brother. Were they too far away from it? Were they too disconcerted to know what to reply? Or did they use the cacophony from below to muffle the echo of their own whispers as they murmured the same things? The loudest gossip monger was impossible to ignore as he oafishly admonished her to go back to America. There was a brooch, I think, worn by one of the royals at an early meeting with the Duchess of Sussex, which I should double check the facts before I describe it. But have a look yourself. After years of being told that she was unworthy and ungrateful, the newlywed took the crier's advice and returned from whence she came. Despite one tattler's audacious cautions not to force her husband to, and she quotes again, "choose between you and us," he did in fact choose his wife, just as he did the day he married her, much to their chagrin. Ironically, though society spurned her placement at the top of the pyramid, when she leaves with her husband, for some, it calls into question whether the pyramid's peak is still something to aspire to. God, this is good. Whether those at the top are truly elite. Whether blood and birth really are prerequisites. Their departure is considered a rejection of the pyramid as a construct, thus a rejection of the society itself. For others, it was a necessary repudiation and confirmed that just as they suspected, she was NOCD, which translates as not our class, dear. And remember, the Duchess of Cambridge took an awful lot of jip for A, not being an aristocrat, and B, having a mother who had once worked as an air hostess. But she towed the line and fitted in. Final paragraph. Still, that wasn't enough. For society to maintain order, she must be reclassified and her elite status conferred by marriage removed. but the society is trapped in a conundrum. Her husband and their children are at the top of the pyramid by birth and by blood. Now, I'd remind you, this was written before today's announcements about patronages and honorary military appointments being removed from the Duke and Duchess. Her husband and their children are at the top of the pyramid by birth and by blood. Removing titles, military honours, and patronages won't remove her from the top of the pyramid. The only thing that will reclassify her is to remove her from her husband. And the society has been working diligently, though unsuccessfully, to that end since the day they learned that Harry and Meghan were a couple. Do you know, I don't even know the real identity of the person that wrote that, but it seems to me to be the most insightful, informed and plausible explanation of matters royal that I have ever read in my life. And while you won't be surprised to learn that I don't have a spare room full of royal biographies or royal histories, I do read the papers every day, and I try, for obvious reasons, to read stuff that I don't like and papers that I don't agree with. And I have never read anything even half as good as that. Partly because it makes absolutely perfect sense. Partly because it retrospectively explains so many things that I have been baffled and confused by. Indeed, it was inspired, that little piece, by the phone-in we did on Monday, asking what on earth is it that she's supposed to have done wrong? And partly because it's so prescient. Remember, this was written on Monday. Today is Friday. I don't think that qualifies as a scoop either while we're here. But that was written on Monday. Today is Friday. It has literally just been announced that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are to lose their honorary military appointments and royal patronages. And this was written 5 days ago. Removing titles, military honours and patronages won't remove her from the top of the pyramid. The only thing that will reclassify her is to remove her from her husband. And the society has been working diligently, though unsuccessfully, to that end since the day they learned that Harry and Meghan were a couple. I think, and obviously my natural immodesty pains me slightly to say this, I think that's among the most powerful words you've ever heard on this programme. It's absolutely brilliant. And I'm not sure that you can argue with a single syllable of it.
Welcome back to Sussex Ways, squaddies. For years, we've watched Prince Harry and Meghan become the subjects of endless headlines, relentless criticism, and an obsession that simply refuses to fade. But have you ever stopped to ask why? Why does everything they do spark such extraordinary reactions, even years after stepping away from royal duties? Well, award-winning broadcaster James O'Brien believes he has found the answer. In fact, he recently described one particular analysis of Harry and Meghan as the most insightful piece of commentary he has ever read. And what makes it so remarkable is that it doesn't focus on attacking or defending the Sussexes. Instead, it turns the spotlight back on the media, the monarchy and society itself, asking whether our obsession with Harry and Meghan reveals far more about Britain than it does about the couple. Today, we're breaking down James O'Brien's fascinating perspective and exploring why this commentary has resonated so deeply. Trust me, you'll want to hear every word. So don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and join the conversation. Let's get into it. For years, Prince Harry and Meghan have remained among the most discussed and controversial public figures in Britain. Every appearance, interview, charity initiative, or family development involving the Sussexes seems to ignite fierce debate. While some view them as courageous individuals who chose peace over palace politics, others continue to criticise nearly every move they make. The intensity of these reactions has often raised an important question. Why do Harry and Meghan provoke such extraordinary emotions? That is the very question broadcaster James O'Brien sought to explore when he described one particular piece of commentary as the most insightful analysis he had ever read about the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Rather than focusing on the latest royal headline or tabloid controversy, the commentary examined the bigger picture, the psychology behind the public obsession with Harry and Meghan and what it reveals about modern Britain. According to the analysis, the conversation has long ceased to be simply about two members of the royal family. Instead, Harry and Meghan have become symbols in a much wider cultural debate. Their decision to step away from royal duties, challenging centuries of tradition and shattering expectations that members of the monarchy should quietly accept their roles regardless of personal cost. For many people, that decision represented independence and the right to choose one's own path. For others, it was seen as a rejection of duty and an affront to the institution itself. The commentary also explored the powerful influence of the British tabloid media, arguing that newspapers have devoted enormous attention to Harry and Meghan, often framing their actions through a negative lens while turning ordinary events into major controversies, creating an environment in which outrage is constantly reinforced. Another crucial point raised is the sense of ownership some members of the public feel toward the royal family, leading some observers to react with unusual intensity when the Sussexes disrupted that traditional relationship by choosing financial independence. James O'Brien suggests that this explanation is more persuasive than the endless headlines claiming every controversy stems solely from Harry or Meghan themselves, instead arguing that the public response reflects broader issues surrounding identity, loyalty, media influence, and changing attitudes toward the monarchy, ultimately encouraging viewers to consider whether the extraordinary attention directed at them says more about society than about the couple itself. James O'Brien reveals the most insightful commentary ever written about Prince Harry and Meghan. What truly distinguished this particular piece of analysis, according to O'Brien, was its deliberate departure from the predictable cycle of tabloid fodder and individual grievances that typically dominate discussions about the couple. Rather than rehashing the latest royal scandal or dissecting another controversial statement, the commentary ventured into far more substantial territory. It trained its lens not on Harry and Meghan themselves, but on the British public's seemingly insatiable appetite for their story and what that appetite itself reveals about contemporary society. By shifting focus away from the couple's actions and toward the broader cultural machinery driving the obsession, the analysis exposed a more uncomfortable truth: that the conversation had transcended simple questions of right and wrong, becoming instead a barometer of modern Britain's anxieties about tradition, identity, and institutional authority. O'Brien recognised that this reframing, examining not why people dislike or support the Sussexes, but rather investigating the psychological and social forces that compel millions to remain fixated on their every move, represented a far more sophisticated understanding than the endless cycle of accusation and counter-accusation that typically characterises media coverage. It was, in essence, an examination of the mirror we hold up to ourselves through the prism of their lives. Prince Harry and Meghan as cultural symbols. What makes Harry and Meghan so extraordinarily divisive is not simply a matter of royal protocol or family disagreement. It is that they have transcended their roles as members of the royal family to become symbols in a much wider cultural conversation about duty, independence, and the nature of modern Britain itself. Their decision to step away from royal life challenged centuries of carefully preserved tradition and shattered expectations that had long been considered immutable. Members of the monarchy, the reasoning went, simply accepted their roles regardless of personal cost or desire for alternative paths. Yet for many observers, that very decision represented something profoundly different. An assertion of independence and the fundamental right to choose one's own future. For others, however, it was perceived as something far more troubling, a rejection of duty and an affront to an institution that has defined the nation for generations. And therein lies the crux of the matter. Harry and Meghan's choice did not merely ruffle feathers within palace walls. It became a mirror reflecting deeper divisions within society itself, forcing uncomfortable questions about loyalty, identity, and what we believe people owe to the institutions and traditions that have shaped them. The British tabloid press has wielded remarkable power in shaping the narrative surrounding Harry and Meghan, devoting countless column inches and front pages to their every move, consistently filtered through a lens of negativity and suspicion. What might ordinarily constitute minor personal decisions or routine charitable activities have been systematically transformed into dramatic controversies through careful editorial framing and sensationalist language. This relentless coverage, sustained over years, has fundamentally altered public perception. The sheer volume and repetition of critical commentary has created a self-reinforcing cycle of outrage that requires less justification from the facts themselves and more from the media machinery that perpetuates it. Minor events, a holiday choice, a business announcement, a social media post, become inflated into major scandals through the alchemy of tabloid narration, where context is stripped away and the most inflammatory interpretation is elevated as truth. The cumulative effect is profound. The British media has not merely reported on the Sussexes, but has actively constructed the environment in which public opinion forms, establishing a narrative so dominant that alternative perspectives struggle to gain traction. This demonstrates how institutional media power, when wielded consistently in one direction, possesses the capacity to shape collective understanding, regardless of whether that understanding reflects reality or serves a particular agenda. Yet, beneath the surface of these cultural divisions lies a more fundamental tension that the commentary identifies with striking clarity: the British public's deep-seated sense of ownership over the royal family itself. Because working royals are funded by taxpayers and bound by official duties, many citizens have come to believe they possess an inherent right to judge not merely the professional conduct of these individuals, but the intimate details of their personal lives as well. This relationship, transactional in nature, yet deeply emotional in practice, has long operated on an unspoken contract. The royals receive privilege and public resources, and in exchange they accept the scrutiny and sacrifice that comes with their position. Harry and Meghan's decision to establish financial independence and step away from traditional royal obligations fundamentally disrupted this arrangement, shattering an expectation that had held firm for generations. The couple's departure, then, was not simply a personal choice. It was experienced by many observers as a breach of an implicit agreement, a rejection of the bargain that had always defined what it meant to be royal. This explains in part why the reaction proved so unusually intense, why their absence from official duties generated not mere criticism, but something closer to a sense of betrayal. The Sussexes had, in effect, reclaimed ownership of their own lives, and in doing so, they had stripped away the public's traditional claim to pass judgment on them. For those who believed such judgment to be their right, the consequence was a peculiar kind of outrage. The anger of those who felt something precious had been taken from them. What makes this analysis particularly compelling is its refusal to reduce the Harry and Meghan phenomenon to a simple matter of personal preference or individual failings. Instead, O'Brien emphasises that the intense public reaction encompasses far deeper questions about identity, loyalty, media influence, and our evolving attitudes toward the monarchy itself. Rather than focusing exclusively on the couple's decisions or controversies, the Netflix series, the memoir, the interviews, this commentary suggests that societal factors provide a far more convincing explanation for why reactions have been so extraordinarily polarized. The public's response, when examined closely, reveals fundamental cultural tensions that extend well beyond any single royal controversy. It speaks to anxieties about tradition versus modernity, duty versus personal fulfillment, and the proper role of institutional loyalty in contemporary life. O'Brien's endorsement of this perspective represents a significant departure from the endless cycle of reactive commentary that dominates coverage of the Sussexes, instead positioning their story as a mirror reflecting Britain's own internal divisions and uncertainties about who we are and what we value as a society. Rather than offering a simplistic defence or criticism of the Sussexes, James O'Brien invites audiences to step back and examine the forces that have turned Prince Harry and Meghan into cultural lightning rods. His reflections challenge viewers to think beyond sensational headlines and ask whether the media's fascination with the couple has become a story in its own right. In doing so, O'Brien suggests that the conversation has fundamentally shifted. It is no longer primarily about the actions of two individuals, but rather about what our collective obsession with them reveals about the society in which we live. The enduring debate surrounding the Sussexes highlights the changing relationship between the monarchy, the press, and the public in ways that deserve serious examination. Rather than accepting the endless cycle of outrage and counter-outrage that dominates tabloid coverage, O'Brien encourages us to recognise that this debate is ultimately a mirror held up to Britain itself, reflecting our evolving attitudes toward duty, independence, institutional loyalty, and the very nature of what it means to be royal in the modern age. It is this broader perspective, this willingness to look beyond the individual controversies and into the deeper currents that drive public reaction, that O'Brien believes makes such commentary genuinely insightful and worth our attention.